Robin Hood Prince of Thieves for the NES was one of those games I always wanted to do when I first started reviewing games, right after Bayou Billy, because I actually have another very personal connection to this one, because I own this game as well, and this one kind of plagued my childhood as well, because I owned it, it was terrible, and I finished it several times, actually, but it was just really frustrating, and even as a kid, I used to like a lot of stuff, but even I had to admit this game sucked. And I guess the reason I got it was because I kind of liked the movie, the Kevin Costner movie. I even knew back then it had flaws, but I kind of liked the action. I dug Morgan Freeman, and I really liked Alan Rickman, who, even as a little kid, I loved Alan Rickman in Die Hard, Robin Hood. You can't get enough of that guy. He's always awesome. I got a lot of flack, actually, for calling British accents quote-unquote gay. The English came out of the woodwork. Not just the English, the Irish, the Scots, the Welsh. Everybody in the United Kingdom and all around Europe came out to either nicely or not so nicely correct me that there is no such thing, actually, as a British accent. Mostly because the people who live on the British Isles have a myriad of accents, from the Cockney to the North Londoner to of course, the Irish, Scots, and Welsh, and all sorts of accents in between. So for some reason, man, the British get really, really offended when you kind of generalize them into accents, because they take great pride in their specialized, unique accents that distinctify them in terms of where they live, what kind of social class they generally come from, and what kind of education they have. So, man, they really got upset with me over that one. And I was kind of making a joke when I called the British accent gay. I wasn't being serious, because, of course, the really angry ones would immediately fire back and say something like, "Oh yeah, well, your American accent makes you sound like a bloody idiot." I'm like, well, yes, they do, although you're, of course, generalizing the American accent, which have several degrees of idiocy, from, you know, the deep Southerner to the Boston faux British accent type guy, to the Midwestern Minnesota nice type accent, you know, kind of the Sarah Palin, well, gosh golly darn, I can see Russia from my house type of accent. But, you know, they all make us sound like idiots. That's kind of the point of accents, is that there's something we can immediately latch onto and make fun of. The best comment I ever got when it came to the whole British accent controversy was, "We don't have accents. You're the one with the stupid accent." So I thought that was pretty funny, and I actually posted that on my website. That was one of the better ones. But Robin Hood, the game for the NES, I think the first thing you'll notice, and I point this out, is the color palette in the initial levels is really washed out and scummy and filthy. It's like gray and brown, and it's just terrible. I know the color palette on the NES is pretty limited, but this was even pretty sad. It just looked like you were looking at a washed out turd in the woods. The RPG elements for this were really awkward in that you had to navigate text menus to do anything role-playing-ish. And this was... The prison is really the only time where you actually use specific inventory items, like having to get a key and open it. You use keys a few other times, but there's no real interaction. There's nothing clever that's ever done with this concept. It should have just been able to, like, oh, you pick up the key, and if you approach the door with the key, you use it automatically. But now you have to go through a text menu, navigate it. It's really terrible. The other thing is the inventory has like a paper doll type thing where you have to put the weapons and armor on your characters. It's a good concept, and in other better games it works a lot better. But in this case, I never understood why you wouldn't just immediately upgrade to the better weapon whenever you got it. So, like, it would always, you know, you'd get better armor, but it wouldn't take effect unless you actually put it on. And so I guess they wanted to give you the option of who you wanted to put your armor on, who you wanted to give the better sword to. But, of course, you're always going to give yourself the best weapons and armor because you're the only guy you have any control over. I also liked how every bad guy and everyone explodes. Like, you stab them with a sword, and apparently they ingested condoms full of jet fuel, and they just burst into flames. This was the worst part of the game. The way they tried to... They attempted to simulate mass-scale combat by pulling the camera way out and having you control little stick figures, these little meeples, as they run around and they attack. And there's no depth to this whatsoever because your NPCs are complete idiots. What I think might have saved this is if, when it pulled out to the mass combat, if this turned into some kind of Smash TV type stage, where, like, your guys would run around with swords, and all of a sudden Robin Hood would be able to, like, rapid-fire his longbow like a fucking machine gun. That would have been awesome.
And then you go to Sherwood Forest, where you find Guy of Gisborne, and then you have to kick his ass. And guess how you have
Actually, no, I take it back. The most hateful aspect of this game is the dueling, the one-on-one dueling, but I'll get back to that later. But this is the most repetitive, I think. You face this a lot. One of the funnier aspects of this stage is how you can control the other characters if Robin dies. You can actually jump into the shoes of the other characters. You gotta love the Rickman.
But all the Smurfs, they just line up in a conga line and happily wade into your swords of fury, and you win.
I seem to remember this game got a lot of coverage in Nintendo Power, too. Nintendo Power had this kind of bad habit of whitewashing games and making them seem a lot better than they were. All right, the really bad isometric perspective. I just love how you can walk into the tops of shit. That actually strikes me as a very specific programming decision to make sure you get blocked by stuff. I don't know why they did that. It almost seems like it'd be harder to not code it that way.
Because it's dull, you twitch, it'll hurt.
I have no idea what these things are supposed to be. I think they're supposed to be wolves, but they actually make little meowing noises.
I'm not kidding. By feral cats. Nothing but. And these cats will kick your fucking ass.
You'll probably notice at some point coming up that the screen kind of inexplicably turns this really cloudy green type color, and the graphics get all corrupted. I really have no idea why that happened. I was playing this game on an emulator. I own the cartridge, but I didn't actually have a TV card, so most of my NES stuff was captured by emulator. And for some reason, the video capture I used to get the video for this, for some reason the video output became all green and cloudy and corrupted. I think it was the encoder or something, but there's no way I could fix it without recapturing the footage again. Yeah, here we go. It's all going to turn green. I don't know why that happened, but sorry.
And of course he's not
it's turning really bad now.
He's just sitting in the kitchen playing with himself.
And it's gone.
Apparently the cats want to leave.
It doesn't really look like it. Guy's playing with himself.
Master Robin, is it you? They tore me eyes out. So we go to Maid
That was the worst. That clipping into the tower. God.
Get into the fucking towers. There's a guardsman there. He sees your amulet. He lets you in. So I don't know where Marion is.
Anyway, I was really only able to review NES games at this point. Okay. I do love the bit with Pumpkinhead, but I was only able to review NES games at this point because I didn't have a TV card, I didn't have a video capture card, I didn't even really have a VCR I could use to capture footage on a tape to get to the computer. All I could really do was capture off emulators or whatever I could play on the PC. There are several video capture programs that will run on the PC, but at the time they actually weren't that great. So the capture program I was actually using was using an emulator, but again, it was only NES. So I was kind of limited to the Nintendo for this. Until I think my next review, when I actually figured out how to capture footage using a program called Fraps, F-R-A-P-S. That's actually a really good one, and it's improved a great deal over the last 2 years. Very nice for capturing stuff off your computer screen, and it's really evolved with the times to deal with Windows Vista. It didn't used to be able to capture desktop stuff. Basically, it would only capture stuff if it ran off your 3D accelerator. So basically, like anything that ran on the surface, like common file windows or Flash animation or website stuff, it wouldn't be able to get that. And to some extent, it's still kind of iffy on that, but it still works really well, and I use it a lot for anything on the PC.
You'll eventually need this thing called the Druid's Dagger, but it looks like a normal dagger, so if you throw it out...
I automatically hate any RPG that involves the wholesale slaughter of animals, not because I really care for animals, but because it seems like every RPG, from the beginning of time, the first 4 levels, you're killing giant roaches, you're killing giant rats, and you're killing wolves. It's like you have to reach level 10 or something before you ever get to promote to actual orcs or human opponents. So, the beginning of almost every RPG, you serve as some kind of glorified exterminator. Not fun.
And so we fight. So this is one of the easiest fights because Little John's staff actually doesn't really have that much reach.
Yeah, this is the fighting. This is probably the most simplistic, crappiest fighting system ever invented. Just because you essentially have one attack, you can duck, but you can't attack while ducking, and you can jump, and that's about it. It's completely counterintuitive to everything you might possibly know about sword fighting, or at least cinematic-style sword fighting. Just so not fun, and I don't think anyone ever really liked this system, although I did have a few people come out of the woodwork to defend this game, but I never saw them stick up for this fighting system or give a good reason why it was at all exciting.
Yeah! You're down now, Dillweed. And we haven't even gotten started yet, because now you form the Merry Men. And
I think a major reason I hated this game so much was because at the time there were so many great RPGs to choose from, and I chose this one. Like, I could have been playing Final Fantasy, I could have been playing Crystallis, Faxanadu, just any other game but this game, and for some reason I was not old enough to fully comprehend the fact that basically every movie licensed game sucks balls.
Man, Pumpkinhead's back.
Gotta love the Pumpkinhead.
Okay, you have to break up a wedding for Will Scarlet, whose wife has been kidnapped by
But there's really nothing worse than having a choice between several games and choosing the absolute wrong one, because your only source for reviews at that time was Nintendo Power. You didn't have the internet, you know. I couldn't really check on this type of stuff, so it was basically word of mouth, and my friends were idiots. So yeah, I got stuck with this one.
And then you gotta fight this guy, because of course he's not gonna stand for it. And it's another one of these boring
I really hated how you couldn't continue, you couldn't save, there was no password in this game, and you basically had to play it all in one sitting, which says a lot of things. One, you can finish this game in about an hour. Two, there are so many bullshit ways you can get killed in this game, just at the very, very end, and you gotta play it all over again. I think you get like 3 lives. But you can die so many cheap ways leading up to the very end of this game. I remember the worst part, the part I would die the most at anyway, is later on you'll face like this swordmaster. The Merry Men send you off to get trained, or to find a swordmaster to train them on how to fight. But you have to beat this guy at a duel, and this guy has this enormous health bar. And worse, it's almost entirely level ground. And so what you really don't ever want to do in this game is duel a guy on level ground, because they'll almost always beat you. You have to have some kind of uneven ground so you can hit them in the kneecaps. That's the best way to really handle it. But I would almost always die there. Maybe it just kind of got in my head, or maybe it was really that hard, but I would just die there all the goddamn time. I remember the boar would kill me a lot, too. It was always around this middle part that I would just get wiped out. You also had to remember at all times to make sure your health was maxed out before you tried these. And I almost always would forget. It was just one of those things that, for some reason, I would forget to use my health potions, eat the food, and I would walk into these sword duels with life bars that uneven. I'd have like 2, and the swordmaster guy would have like 30. And so you have no chance. Right there, bam, toast.
Hey, you gotta fight your way back, because I forgot to do a save state.
Yeah, even here, I was playing this game, and I forgot to do a save state. I forgot to save my game so that I wouldn't have to replay the whole game over, and I did. I had to replay the whole game over to get to that point, and it brought back so many bad memories. I was just sitting there like, it's happening again. This is what you want to do. You got to give it to them hardcore. Bam.
A giant wild boar for the Merry Men, because they're too pussy to do it themselves. I taught you guys how to use a fucking bow.
Here's where the game kind of loses the plot. You got to do all these little subquests, collecting taxes, fighting boars, really artificially decompressing the plot for this movie. Save Maid Marion? Nah, let's fight a giant boar. This is probably my favorite part of the whole review, because I really like using the Benny Hill music and using the Monty Python reference to kind of go through the castle invasion, because the last quarter of the game is almost all this stage, where you're fighting the Smurfs, you do the horse thing, you fight more Smurfs, more and more Smurfs. There's like 3 or 4 stages of the Smurfs. Here's a really bullshit way you could die, too. The horse chases. It was kind of like you know how characters chase each other in like a Hanna-Barbera cartoon where the background keeps repeating? It was easy enough, but if you flaked out, if you lost your focus for a second, one hit, you're dead, one of your lives is gone, and by this point you were probably on your last life. It's just a really cheap, bullshit way to die, and I hated it. This review took a long time to finish, too. Longer than you'd think, or longer than I would have thought. For some reason, I was using a friend's copy of, I think it was Adobe Premiere, to cut this together. And I don't know why, but for some reason, it did not like the footage that was output by the emulator, the stuff I used to capture the video. It really did not like any of the video I used from the movie. It didn't like the emulator. Basically, when I would put the footage together, it took basically 2 minutes for it to respond to mouse inputs. My computer was not slow either. It was a pretty good computer. But the movie footage just threw it for a loop. I don't know if the movies were that big. Like, I think it output AVIs. Or I don't know if it was just bad interactions with other types of movies. Like, I think I used a couple MPEGs. But the interaction between these movies made this such a chore to chop together. The program would crash most times. Took forever to put anything together. I basically couldn't preview this because it wouldn't play back. Like, I tried to play back the footage to try to review it. It wouldn't play. I basically had to render it kind of in piecemeal sections, like a minute at a time chunks, and see if I could puzzle those together. And basically through a lot of determination, a lot of trial and error, and just throwing it together, this finally got finished. And I kind of wasn't happy with the finished product because the green blurring effect in the gameplay footage, it really pissed me off. And yeah, it just... It wasn't the ideal finished product, and it was a lot of work, and I could never understand why I had so much trouble with it, and I just knew I had to drop Adobe. I thought maybe it was Adobe Premiere that was the problem. I knew I wasn't really encoding the videos properly, and so it was right about here that I resolved to do this in a much more regular, much more efficient fashion. Up to this point, I was kind of just half-assing it, just kind of throwing a bunch of footage together and narrating over top of it. Just kind of throwing it up in the air and letting it all hit the ground, and however it hit the ground was how I'd put it together. Music video. Oh, please don't let me dance. Yeah. But, yeah. I took a much more organized tack to the reviews later on because I was really tired of this haphazard slapping together of movie footage. So I decided I was going to have, like, I was only going to edit together movie footage that was encoded the same way. I was only going to put together file types of one type. Like, I was never going to mix and match videos because I just thought, I figured that they didn't interact well, so when you're trying to slap together different types of movie files, they don't play well together. And to an extent, I was right. I think even right now I could go back to Adobe as long as I was willing not to slap together different types of movie footage. But up and after this, I think I still kept using Adobe for the next one. I think for The Thing, I think it's the next one. But I had kind of resolved to move on to a better editing software, and one that I actually owned. I didn't want to borrow a friend's copy, which it was a legal copy I was borrowing, but I wasn't sure it was legal for me to be using it. So for some reason I was kind of paranoid about being strictly legal when it came to this, at least when it came to the editing software.
King says, "You may kiss the bride," and Robin goes, "Okay,"
Doink.
and headbutts her. Huh. And they live happily ever after.
This music's from the animated Robin Hood movie, which, I wonder if you can actually get that on DVD now, because I kind of miss that film. I'd watch that all the time on tape as a kid, and I don't have it anymore. Okay, I think the next review is probably a PC game, which is my first ever PC game. John Carpenter's The Thing, which is probably, a lot of people think that's one of my best reviews, and I can't really disagree with them. I really like that review. It was a lot of fun getting footage for that, and it was a lot of fun going back over that game, and so it was kind of a first in a lot of ways. So I'll see you in John Carpenter's The Thing.